mean, it's not always easy, right? It can be challenging. Here, the work environment is high pressure. There's a lot of expectation. There's always someone else waiting behind you who's equally willing to do the job.
Today I'm talking to Imogen Page-Jarrett, who used to be my student at Cambridge. In fact, she came to Cambridge in 2012 when I started, so we started at the same time. And then she graduated and went on to do an MA at Peking University. And since then, she's been living in China. And today we're here in Shanghai, and she's talking about this journey from studying Chinese at Cambridge and being an undergraduate there to ending up as a professional working in China. So Imogen, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview here in Shanghai at the Qiantan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we met 5-6 years ago in Beijing?
Last time was in Beijing. Must be 2018 or something?
Yeah, probably.
And then before that was 2016 when I was at Cambridge.
Yes.
So it's been a while. So
what did you study at Cambridge?
I studied Chinese studies for my undergraduate at Cambridge from 2012 to 2016. And then 1 year of that was an exchange at Peking University in Beijing for our third year.
That was your year abroad.
That was our year abroad.
And how was that year abroad?
Our year abroad, that definitely was one of the highlights of the course, for sure. I mean, it was just such a exciting year. I think after studying the basics for 2 years and then finally getting to go with everyone from your class and really just spend time in China for the first time was so exciting. And at that time of life, you're 20 years old, you're very young, and there's just so much to explore. And we just had a really great time with the teachers that we had at Peking University as well. I think they were really welcoming to us, and we did a lot of traveling within China. It was the first time that I went to Sichuan and Harbin and all these places, and that's definitely one of the best years of my life ever. So
okay, wow. So
it was, and we just had such a great class at Cambridge as well, and all of us together was such a good dynamic. So
the best year in Cambridge was away from Cambridge.
No, I mean the whole experience was great. I mean that was one of the highlights for sure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the only highlight.
Okay.
You can't separate one from the other.
That's true, yeah. And you won the Michael Loewe Prize several years in a row, right?
Yeah.
For best performance in classical Chinese.
I know. I feel embarrassed about that now because I feel like I haven't been using my classical Chinese. But I mean, at the time, I enjoyed that class, and I must have had some affinity for it as well. But
okay, so you haven't been using it.
No, I would say these years I've been using modern Chinese, but mainly because I just haven't had so much opportunity because of the direction that I went in. But I guess I always have a soft spot for it. I mean, there are some texts that we read, like what is it in English? The Chronicles of the Yellow Emperor? The inner...
Huangdi Neijing.
Yeah, Huangdi Neijing. Yeah. I'm always talking about Huangdi Neijing.
Okay.
I'm always going to the Chinese traditional medicine clinics and doing acupuncture and these things. So I mean, Huangdi Neijing always comes up. And I actually recently, 2 years ago, listened to a really great podcast. It was these two guys. One of them's a Chinese doctor in Beijing, and they're basically going through every line of Huangdi Neijing and interpreting it. What does it mean? And I know a lot of friends who have listened to that podcast as well, Chinese friends. And it was just nice to have read it during our studies, but then it's still coming up in everyday life, and then be able to revisit it in new formats, on that podcast. I still think Huangdi Neijing, I know at the time we were studying it from a textual viewpoint, but I feel like that text holds a lot of wisdom.
That's true, yeah. It's true for many ancient texts.
Yeah.
The ones that survived. They survived for a reason.
Yeah, I feel like you're not only learning the classical Chinese itself, but I feel like there is also a lot of wisdom in those texts that we know.
That's true, yeah.
I think we did a bit of The Art of War as well.
Yes,
we?
the Sun Tzu Pingfa.
That's a classic strategy text.
The art of deception.
Exactly,
Yeah.
so
Okay, so what happened after you finished at Cambridge?
Yeah, after I finished at Cambridge, I didn't really know what direction I wanted to go. I eventually settled on continuing my studies, and I actually applied for both the US and China. And I got into the Chinese or Asian Studies program at Columbia, and I also got into a master's program at Peking University, which is where we had done the exchange. And in the end, I went for Peking University because I felt like, you know what, if I'm really going to study China and I'm going to learn Chinese, then I need to be in China. You know, like I've studied at Cambridge for 4 years. I felt like going to Columbia would also have been great, but I really needed to spend some time here in the country. So I went and I did public policy. I got a Chinese government scholarship and I studied public policy for 2 years at Peking University.
Yeah, we saw that video of you
Oh my God.
giving that speech.
It's still going around. Like sometimes I'll like walk into rooms where I don't know people and they'll be like, hey, I know you because I've seen this video on Baidu or something. 各位老师,各位同学,各位嘉宾,大家上午好。我是白若曦，很高兴今天能够代表留学生在开学典礼上发言。我来自英国，我本科毕业于剑桥大学中文系。接下来， And it's like, on the one hand, I'm like, it's like really like, wow, like what an achievement that I did. Because that was really hard. But at the same time, I always feel really embarrassed because it's like, I can never get rid of it. But I mean, I think it was good, like from where I was at that point in my life. And I had 2 days to prepare that because it was originally meant to be someone else. And the teacher, like, they dropped out and I was found at the last minute. I had to write this script, have it reviewed and everything, and they never told me how many students were going to be in that auditorium. I thought it was going to be like 30 people, like a class thing. I walked in and I saw like literally like 2,000 chairs and I was like, wait, how big is this? And then I realized on the day that I was going to be speaking to like thousands. It was literally the whole of our year, not just foreigners, but also all the Chinese students. And it was the matriculation day, basically. It was like insane, the atmosphere in that room. And
yeah, we were all excited to see that.
But all I had to say was like, oh, like, I studied Chinese at Cambridge, like, 我毕业于剑桥中文系, and then everyone's like, wow!
Yeah.
Like, I think they're just happy that someone, you know, there are people who are enthusiastic about China and then taking it seriously, and I mean, that's nice to hear about your country, right? So yeah.
No, I don't think you should be embarrassed about that video. It's great.
Oh, I
think
know.
it was wonderful. Yeah.
There's that one, and then there's another one. A few years ago, I went on a talk show here in Shanghai. It's called 非正式会谈, informal talks, and it's all foreigners from all different countries. There was like, I was just a guest, but there are like permanent guests on the show. Like there were people from like America, Myanmar, all over the world, all with great Chinese. And then there are like 3 Chinese hosts, like very famous Chinese hosts, and then each week there are different topics of conversation and games and stuff, and that one also like gets circulated as well. So it's like the Beida one and then the talk show one. So yeah, it's fun.
Nice. So you're kind of a celebrity.
No. I don't think so. I mean, I think there are foreigners here who have kind of got that celebrity status because they do that a lot and they have really made a name for themselves. But
yeah.
I don't know. People are always like, "Oh, you should do more of it," you know. But it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's true.
To be perceived by so many people.
Yes.
I don't know if I can do it like all the time.
Okay. So once you had your MA from Beida, what happened after that? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I really wanted to stay here and work because I had built up such a good network of friends and people I cared about here. And I also felt like I'd made a lot of progress with my Chinese, and I wanted to see like where I could take that. And I felt like living here, there's just so much you can get from the experience. So I really wanted to, I've studied here. I really want to work here and explore that. But I mean, securing a job and getting a work visa, I mean, as a foreigner in any country, it's not always easy, especially as a fresh graduate. So I remember that was a really challenging time, and having to do internships and apply for lots of different things. But yeah, eventually, I mean, I started out at the one of the chambers of commerce, and then from that I went on to be an analyst here. So I guess I studied public policy, right? So starting off more in the policy side of things, more kind of like foreign companies in China kind of thing, and then going more into analysis and forecasting. And I actually did some like extra courses in economics, so I went on to more analyzing modern Chinese economy, business environment, that kind of thing. And that's kind of the direction that I ended up going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how long have you been living in China now?
This is my 9th year.
Gee.
And I'm turning 30 next week.
Congratulations.
So I mean, basically all of my 20s have been spent in China, and then that's quite a formative period of life. So yeah, I mean that's basically counting the year abroad and stuff that I did as well. But since I graduated in 2016, I've been here full time.
So how do you like it?
I still love it.
What are your impressions of living here?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, it's a big country, right? And there's every place that you go it's also different. But my overall impression is, I mean, I first came to China when I was 15 years old on an exchange program, and I feel like some elements of my first impression are still true today. One, like my number one thing will always be I just love like people here. Like I always, the reason I started studying Chinese was because the people that I met on that initial exchange, and we're still really good friends now. But there's just something about them so warm and welcoming, and they just had so many interesting things that I felt like really valuable to learn. I mean, even just the language, right? On that initial exchange, watching the Chinese students writing their homework in Chinese characters, I'm like, wow, like that is incredible. Like this language is like amazing. If I can even learn a bit of it, I will be so happy. So I feel like, number one, the people are just great. Like every year I meet like new amazing people. They're so welcoming, bring you into their home, show you Chinese hospitality. The second thing is like the culture. Like there's just so much culture and history and everything that you could learn about. I mean, I just mentioned like traditional Chinese medicine. You could spend like your whole life learning that. You could spend your whole life like learning one aspect of the language or society, or even like one period of history. There's just like so much to learn, which is really exciting, especially if you're someone who likes learning. And I feel like there's so many great places to explore. Like within China, there are just so many amazing places to travel. You've got different climates, different scenery, you've got cities, countryside, mountains, deserts, so on. And then I just generally find it very convenient, technology-wise. I mean, you've got so many different apps on your phone. Mobile payments is seamless. Calling a car, it comes instantly, takes you where you need to go. Ordering food right to your door, or your shopping, or everything. I mean, you can even just like book someone to go and do a task for you, like go and pick something up. I just find it very convenient, and I think living here is just, for me, it's just really nice, and I really like it.
Okay, and in terms of working in China, how is that different from, say, working in the West? And I know you haven't worked.
I haven't really worked in the West. I mean, I do have some work experience, but I mean, I haven't really worked in the West for an extended period of time. So I mean, maybe you can speak on that more than I can. But I mean, here, I think for the industry that I'm in, I think China, there's still, it's not always easy, right? It can be challenging. Here, the work environment is high pressure. There's a lot of expectation. And there's always someone else waiting behind you who's equally willing to do the job. So I would say the level of competition is pretty high. And you can see that here, even from education to when people start working. It's always very high level of competition. So in that sense, it can be, I would say, quite stressful. But I always felt like here it's a bit more dynamic for me than in the UK. I just felt like there were more opportunities and areas that I started to get involved in that I might not necessarily have the opportunity to if I was in the UK, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I think, if you've been learning Chinese and then you want to work here, I feel like there's so many different things that you could do with it.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
And once you finish your MA here, mm-hmm. Did it ever occur to you to do a PhD?
I thought about it. I feel like, for me, something I really struggled with when I was doing my undergrad and when I was doing my master's was my thesis. Like, I did a thesis, right? But I really struggled on finding, like, a topic that was mine or, like, something I was really passionate about. I remember the feeling of wanting to learn Chinese and, like, feeling so excited about it. But later on, I never really found something that I was so passionate and, like, interested to learn about. That's only recently come back to me, like, in the last few years. Like, for example, traditional Chinese medicine. Or I was also talking to you about, like, researching about, like, ancient calendar keeping in ancient China. Things like this have only come to me in the last few years, and I've started to get interested in them, and I've got that feeling that I had initially about learning Chinese. But straight out of my master's program, I really didn't feel like there was something, because I feel like for a PhD you have to be really passionate about it.
Well, even for an MA, right?
Even for an MA,
even for a BA.
Yeah, even for any degree.
The course at Cambridge is not easy, right? So I assume it took a bit of stamina to finish it. So you had some sort of passion.
That was really tough. Was really tough. So it's not something I would necessarily say I would never do, but it wasn't like I felt like it was something I would do straight out of masters. And I really did want to come out and work and get some real industry and real life experience, and I felt like, for me personally, staying in the school environment, I felt like it was at that point in my life too limiting, if that makes sense. I wanted to get out. I wanted to start making money and doing business and that kind of thing.
And you're doing that now.
I guess now is more of a, going out there, doing business, talking with clients, that kind of thing. I think it's also interesting. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And as someone who's spent 9 years here in China?
Yeah.
How do you compare how was China when you first came here, or when you probably year abroad? You spent the whole year.
Yeah, even then till now, it's really different. I think that, one thing that I just mentioned about the technology and how it's permeated everyone's life, I think that has been quite a recent thing, because when we were here in 2014, the delivery service still wasn't that developed. It wasn't every restaurant that had it, and not everyone was using their phone to do that. So I feel like that has really developed a lot. And also, I spent most of my time in Beijing and Shanghai, and other large cities. So I feel like just the general level of development, a lot of areas have become not necessarily more built up, but for example, like the shopping areas have become there's more design to it, if that makes sense. and also like consumer behavior or different groups in society. I feel like that has also changed. People, like, I know people were always well educated in China, but just the general level of education, and also their general expectation for a certain quality of life for certain groups, especially in big cities, I think has definitely increased.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's just been a myriad of changes. I think maybe this was always the case. I feel like in general people here are quite savvy about what's going on in the world, globally, internationally. I might only be realizing that now because in the last few years, because I've been working, and previously I was a student. But I mean, and at the time, like in the early in like 2010, 2014, that period, things were developing very fast, moving very fast. And you do still have that sense here, but it has slowed down a little bit. I think also because of the pandemic and everything that happened. So things are settling a bit, not quite as breakneck speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just going back to your studies for a second, the course at Cambridge was very heavy in culture, right?
Yeah.
In terms of content. So there was a strong language part,
Yeah.
language component, and also a history and cultural component.
History, film studies, literature, all of this we covered.
Yeah, and what do you think of that now in terms of your, how does that help you with working here, living here?
Mm-hmm.
Was that very helpful, or was that tangentially helpful?
I think it was actually really helpful. I think coming into a conversation with a Chinese person, you're never going to be able to know everything that they know about their own country. So you're never going to know everything that ever happened in Chinese history or all the classic books that they have read. But if you can at least have a few novels or historical events that you can talk about, I think that really elevates you and gains you respect, and also builds better connections with them. So I think it's not enough to just learn the language. You also do have to learn about their points of reference. And I mean, classic works of literature, history, these are all, I think, very solid things to understand about a society. So I definitely wouldn't regret learning any of those things. And I think it's also really important for context. It's such a cliche saying, but you can't understand the modern without understanding what's come before it. And I feel like there are things that sometimes repeat themselves, but understanding the nuances and dynamics and how things came to this point, I think has been very useful. And also I think just from studying history and literature and things like this, you can also learn a lot about how the society as a whole, like their ways of thinking. And, you know, you might be coming here and then working on new topics, but the way of thinking about them is maybe still very similar. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's really helpful because ultimately you want to work here, or you're going to meet people at a certain level. So you want to come across as an educated person, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just a person who speaks the language, right? So you want to be able to kind of rise to that level.
Yeah, and it's not just knowing it, it's like, can you even have an opinion about it?
Exactly.
An educated opinion, and discuss with them.
And the other thing about that the past kind of has an impact on the present. So that's very true, but it's not just that, but also because the people in the present, they identify themselves, or they have a self-identity somehow involving all this baggage or this cultural background.
Yeah,
and so you want to understand that, right? And that's what you said about these reference points. So you want to be able to connect to them along those points.
Yeah.
I mean, we've always had this argument, right, at Cambridge, that the cultural part or all the content part is very important. We're not just a language center.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that somebody thinks that way after having gone through the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not necessarily obvious, but over the long term, I think there have been so many occasions where that has really, really come through for me. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so
Yeah, no, thanks for your time.
no, thank you for coming here and having this conversation with me.
Thank you.
And wish you all the best in this Year of the Dragon.
Yes, happy Year of the Dragon.